नमस्कार, सलाम, सत श्री अकाल, या अली मदद, गुड इवनिंग। आप सबका स्वागत है हमारे प्रोग्राम कैलगरी फोकस में। आप ये प्रोग्राम देखते हैं हमारे अपने फेवरेट टीवी चैनल पंजाबी नेशनल पर, और हम आपको ये प्रोग्राम की झलकियाँ या इसके बारे में बताते हैं हमारे अपने पसंदीदा रेडियो चैनल रेडियो सुरसंगम पर। आप ये प्रोग्राम हमारे यूट्यूब, फेसबुक चैनल पर भी देख सकते हैं। हर वीक की तरह मैं आपका होस्ट अमृत आपके साथ आज जुड़ा हूँ और अपने साथ लेकर आया हूँ एक और अमेजिंग गेस्ट को। लेकिन ये गेस्ट हमारी रोज़मर्रा की ज़िंदगी के लिए एक बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करते हैं, जो कि है हमारी सेफ्टी। हर एक शहर में देर आर थ्री मेजर कंपोनेंट्स, और आई कैन से थ्री मेजर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस विच हेल्प अस टू बी सेफ। उनमें से एक पुलिस, दूसरा मैं कह सकता हूँ जो हमारे हॉस्पिटल्स हैं, डॉक्टर्स, और थर्ड जो हमारे फायर डिपार्टमेंट है। ये तीन डिपार्टमेंट्स ऐसे हैं जो कि हमारी सेफ्टी के लिए हमेशा तत्पर तैयार रहते हैं और कोशिश ये करते हैं कि जो कम्युनिटी है, घर है, लोग हैं, वो सेफ रहें। Whenever you see an accident, the first thing people call is 911, और वहाँ पर सबसे पहले हमारे पास पहुँचाई जाती है एम्बुलेंस और फायर के जो ट्रक्स हैं वो वहाँ पहुँचते हैं। आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत ही अमेजिंग फायर फाइटर जुड़े हैं। आइए उनसे बातचीत करें और जानें वो हमारे लिए क्या क्या आज इन्फॉर्मेशन जो है वो आज लेके आए हैं। Thank you, sir, for coming on this show. I would like to welcome Mr. Jeff, who is a community safety coordinator from Fire Department of Calgary, and it's amazing weather today, sir. And you are here. What else we need to talk about? The fire safety, the precautions, and how people can get a little bit, safe in case there is a fire. And we thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, thank you for having us. It's a real honor to be here, and look forward to, getting some of those messages out to all those listeners and viewers.
That's amazing, sir. थोड़ा सा मैं मिस्टर जेफ के बारे में बताना चाहूँगा। पिछले 22 साल से 22 years वो कैलगरी फायर डिपार्टमेंट में हैं, और 8 साल उन्होंने इवन हेलीकॉप्टर जो पायलट्स होते हैं, हॉक, उनके साथ काम किया है। और वो उनका जो एक मेजर पार्ट रहा है वो है फायर डिपार्टमेंट का हाई एंगल टीम। वो हमसे हम जानेंगे कि वो क्या होता है। लेकिन एक बहुत ही इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्टर जो यहाँ सामने आता है वो ये है कि ये तत्पर अपनी जान पर खेलकर हम लोगों की सुरक्षा करते हैं, या ऐसी किसी सिचुएशन पे जहाँ पे लोग फंसे हुए हैं, चाहे वो फ्लड्स हों, चाहे वो फायर हो, चाहे वो एक्सीडेंट हो, वहाँ पर ये लोग पहुँचकर लोगों के लिए अपनी जान पर खेलते हैं। Jeff, sir, the main thing what I was just telling to our listeners over here was that how fortunate we are that you guys are there, and irrespective what kind of situation is, whether it's floods or wildfire or fire in a community, or it's an accident, you guys are always there. You guys are, you don't think about yourself, your own lives, and still you go out to help others. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we sign up for when people are applying for this career is we want to help people. And when you live in a major municipality like Calgary, or even smaller areas around the city, there's always going to be hazards. There's always going to be situations where people need help, and we're just fortunate enough that we have a world-class fire department here in Calgary and serving the citizens. And we just try to do our best in making sure we can ease somebody's worst scenario, whatever's happening that day for them.
Jeff, sir, the first thing which comes to my mind is a scenario where we have a fire in one of the houses. Now, this is the most common of many kind of fires which happens, and I would like you to comment on that and give us some more information. A lot of people in Calgary are immigrants. They are from the places where the smoke detectors or smoke alarms are not too much in fashion, or people don't have them in their houses. Maybe they live in a village where it's already not a congested community, it's big house and you are not even worried about. And the houses back, like especially in Southeast Asia, they are made up of concrete, cement, but here there are wooden houses which are, you can say, very good conductor of fire, and it can burn in minutes. So I want you to help me over here to understand, and the listeners, what as a fire, as a department and an officer over there, if there is a fire in the house, what are the things one has to remember, one has to implement? It could be any kind of fire, electrical, or first we talk about the general fire, right? The electrical, or by smoke, or like by cooking. So what are the few steps you recommend for the people in that house to do when they see somewhere flames coming out of their house?
Well, I think you nailed it right on the head. With the new construction these days, it's and I mean it's even gotten quicker as far as the way fires go up. In the last 5 to 10 years, as opposed to the way it used to be. New construction, we see fires that can double in size every 30 seconds. So understandably, we only have minutes to get out of our house.
Right.
So there's not really a portion of time where you have the ability to sit back and evaluate. It's got to be a read and react, and calling the people that are there to help you. When we talk about the tri-services, the police, fire, EMS in Calgary, that's what we're paid to do. So we want to make sure that we can give not only the homeowners the best chance of survival, them and their families, or even their neighbors, per se, but we also want to make sure that we're going to try to save as much as their valuables as possible. So, if we have a situation where there's fires occurring, or there's a possibility of a fire occurring, we encourage Calgarians, all the citizens, to call 911 and then let us evaluate the situation, because we do this for a living and we get to see different scenarios. So if we just get called out, it gives us an opportunity to evaluate and determine whether or not it's safe for that resident to go back into the home, or whether they need to go and stay elsewhere until something can be resolved.
Right. So calling 911, the first step, right? So after that, what do you think? Like, they should be out of the house right away, or they try to fight the fire themselves?
Yeah, so it's important. It's human nature where we want to try to defend our home and
the valuables and whatever we have, right?
But we have to realize that because the fire spreads so quickly, and it's not necessarily the fire that's going to get you, it's usually the smoke. So we want to try to encourage people to get out of their house as quickly as possible. Call 911. The quicker we get that call, the faster we can get there, and then reduce the damage and loss of life. So there's different things we can recommend, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But first and foremost, if there's a fire and you try to put it out, if you want to try like a quick splash of water or whatever, if it's a combustible, maybe it's a garbage can on fire, that's fine. But you have to keep in mind that it's going to spread fast. So make that phone call to 911. Every second counts. So.
Absolutely, sir. Now we talk about a scenario which is very common in Northeast, I can say, of Calgary, because the people are here, a lot of are immigrants, and the cooking is something which is they're doing in each and every house, right? And especially in the cooking which is from Southeast Asia, there is a lot of oil is used, and over here the stove, or you can say the where we cook, that is electrical, right? We have gas, but they are there, but sometimes we just forget that it is on, and the oil starts burning, right? And we just take the scenario where the oil catches fire and there is a smoke, right? What do you recommend in this scenario? What the person has to do? Besides, first thing is call 911, right? Second thing, what they should do.
So to sum it up, cooking fires are the number one cause of fires throughout North America.
Oh, is
so
it?
it's not just a quadrant of, of our city that we live in that we see higher statistics in that area, but we see it everywhere.
Okay.
But you kind of hit it really strongly there. When you talk about cooking with oils, there's increased danger there because, people think that they can throw water on it, which is absolutely the worst thing you can do. So what we recommend is if you're cooking with oils, and we understand, different cultures will cook with oils more than others, and I love that kind of food too, so I get it. But most importantly is what you want to do is exclude the oxygen from that. So if you start to see, the oil's starting to get to that incipient stage where it wants to almost ignite, what we want to do is shut off the burner and then cover it. So put whether it's a proper fitting pot lid or a baking sheet or anything along those means where you're not allowing the oxygen to get to it, because in order to make a fire, we call it the fire tetrahedron, you need heat, oxygen, and fuel.
Right.
So if we separate one of those options from that fire, then it won't allow it to burn. So in that case, we're separating the oxygen from the combustible fluid, and you're still going to call 911, but at the end of the day, you're not putting water on it, you're reducing that flash over from occurring.
तो जैसा कि आपने सुना, सबसे पहले हम लोग घबरा जाते हैं जब हम आग देखते हैं पैन के अंदर, और वो जो स्टोव है उसको हम लोग एक इलेक्ट्रिकल स्टोव है तो वो भूल जाते हैं कि उसमें भी इलेक्ट्रिसिटी है. तो जैसे मिस्टर जेफ ने कहा कि आपको ये ध्यान रखना है कि वो जो एक उसकी जो 3 फैक्टर्स हैं उसमें से अगर आप एक को निकाल देंगे, दैट विल हेल्प टू कर्ब डाउन दी फायर. 911 आप ज़रूर कॉल करें, 911 सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट है, लेकिन उसके बाद अगर आप उस पैन को ढक देते हैं तो शायद वो जो आग है वो काबू में करी जा सकती है फॉर द टाइम बीइंग. लेकिन आप प्रोफेशनल नहीं हैं तो आप प्लीज़ ध्यान रखें कि आपकी सेफ्टी सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, आपके परिवार की सेफ्टी सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. तो 911 कॉल करें और उसके बाद देखें कि क्या हो सकता है. अगर आप उसको नहीं काबू कर सकते हैं तो प्लीज़ आप घर से बाहर जाएं, जैसे मिस्टर जेफ ने कहा, जो कि बहुत ज़रूरी है आपकी सेफ्टी के लिए. आप देख रहे हैं प्रोग्राम कैलगरी फोकस ऑन पंजाबी नेशनल. एक छोटा सा ब्रेक, ब्रेक के बाद दोबारा आपके साथ हम लोग बातचीत के लिए हाजिर होंगे. आपका फिर से स्वागत है हमारे प्रोग्राम कैलगरी फोकस में. हम लोग आज बात कर रहे हैं मिस्टर जेफ से, जो कि कम्युनिटी कोऑर्डिनेटर हैं सेफ्टी के कैलगरी फायर डिपार्टमेंट में. उन्होंने अभी बताया हमें कि किस तरह से जो ऑयल बेस्ड फायर्स होती हैं उनको हम लोग थोड़ा सा कर्ब कर सकते हैं या उनसे बच सकते हैं. Mr. Jeff, how or what would you recommend to the people or our listeners to have a plan, like in case there is a fire? Because the first thing which hits the person when he or she sees flames or smoke coming out is panic. Communication. We are unable to communicate with each other because we are in panic and we just start running here and there, and the focus is, everybody has a different focus. They want to get out, somebody wants to take out the money which they have somewhere, or maybe their valuables, and then run out. So what do you recommend? What should be the drill in case such scenario happens?
Yeah, and it's a great question because essentially we have 3 areas where it's our bread and butter of education. It's prevention, detection, and evacuation. So when we come across a scenario where we have a fire, we need to be prepared, because it's one thing saying you're prepared under calm circumstances, but as soon as you introduce some sort of adrenaline rush, we have an emergency, now you need to know things are going to happen naturally, and you're not trying to think of what you should do next. So,
right.
When we look at our school boards in Calgary, whether it's public, separate, whatever it is, they practice escape plans or evacuation plans 6 times a year. Where we see most of our fires happen in Calgary is in the residential setting, so it's in people's homes. So what we recommend is, you sit down with your family, and this is given, an example of whether it's happening during the evening, or it could happen when you're cooking, but you sit down with your family and you draw out your house. And nobody has to be an architect here. You just draw it out and you get the main shapes, and then you identify 2 different ways out of every room. So what we say to the kids, if you have children, here's your room, what's your primary exit or egress? And that would be the doorway. It's the easiest way out, probably the safest. And now if fire blocks that, and you can feel the heat and you got your door closed and you can't go out that way, what's your other option? Oh, it's a window. Now we know, a lot of bedrooms are on second stories, so we could talk about escape ladders where you can deploy them and use that. But essentially what we're trying to do is encourage people just to be prepared so that if something does happen, you're ready to go. I'll give you a little bit of a personal thing for me is, and because I'm in the industry, I did that with my children. We sat down, we talked about escape planning, sleep with your doors closed because the smoke is the #1 killer over the flames themselves. And then if a scenario happens where you say, okay, now feel the door, is it hot? Okay, we can go to the window. So just being prepared. And then one of the most important pieces to an escape plan is a meeting place outside.
Right.
So identifying how you're going to get out of the home and then go meet at that place and call 911. What we've seen and what we're, one of the risks is that people will go out the front door, people will go out the back door from the same family, and now there's panic because they don't know if the others got out. So having that meeting place will alleviate that issue, right? So the more you practice it, the better you're going to do it. We encourage people to try it, or families, twice a year. And then once you get to the next stage, you can actually set off the alarm, as long as it's not monitored, so you don't get a false alarm. But set off the alarm and see if your kids or children actually hear it, or maybe you have seniors living in the home, just to make sure that, okay, now we know that that's not going to be an issue if the alarms go off, because quite often some people will sleep right through them.
Absolutely.
So it's a risk, and you try to alleviate that risk before it happens, right?
And this is, I think, more important with the seniors also, right? Children are there, but I think the people who are a little bit aged, they should be also taught that or included in that plan, so that in case it happens, because a lot of them, they stay in basement. Now, what plan you say for the basement? What is the escape plan from there?
It'd be the same thing. So when you guys or your family is sitting down and reviewing the plan, you identify who's going to be responsible for, going to get the seniors. It may be a husband and wife, it may be an older, son, but somebody knows that person's responsible for going and getting them. And then that way you're accountable. Everyone knows if you don't meet at the meeting place, you probably know where that person can be found, and you can let fire crews know that when they arrive. But it's a great question, but the facts still are the same. If you have a basement, you have two ways out: up the stairs or out a window. And that's why it's fire code and building code, that every bedroom has to have a window in it. Right? We could keep going into that and talk about bars on windows for security, which actually is
exactly
more of it's harder for us to gain entrance and harder for people to get out. But if you can keep to the basics and just say 2 ways out, up the stairs, safest, easiest. If we can't go that way, we're going out the window. Go to the meeting place, call 911.
तो आपने सुना कि फायर ड्रिल एक बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है जो आपको अपने परिवार के साथ बैठ के ज़रूर करनी चाहिए. इसके बारे में हम लोग और आपको जानकारी देते रहेंगे. Mr. Jeff, where and how important you think the smoke alarms are for a house, and also the fire extinguisher, how important they are? And before we go to that point, I think you have a certain kind of fire alarms. If you can just pick it up and just show the to the camera how they look like and why they are so important.
So I brought a couple different ones. These are the bread and butter of our fire protection. It's our first notification of smoke. So literally, I've got one option here that is strictly just a smoke alarm. There's so many different options on the market right now that really it depends on what you're looking for. This other one has got smoke and carbon monoxide, which is another huge risk in our homes. So, when we're talking about smoke alarms, that early notification is what gives us the best opportunity to get out alive.
Right.
Most people, if they don't have smoke alarms, may sleep through the fire, succumb to the smoke. So, these items are imperative to have in people's homes so that you get that initial notification there's smoke, and then you can get out and use your egress plan.
Carbon monoxide, it is like you told me now, which came to my mind, but usually it's a notion that carbon monoxide is, or these kind of alarms which are for carbon monoxide, they are only essential in a garage, where, especially in winters, where you just start the vehicle and let it run for 4 or 5 minutes before you go and sit in and you drive out. But now you're telling me it is important for the house also.
It is. So I guess to sum it up, carbon monoxide is a product of incomplete combustion. So when we're talking about a natural gas and you say your hot water heater or your furnace, if they're not properly maintained and they're not burning the fuel efficiently, one of the byproducts is carbon monoxide. And what happens is at higher levels will actually, at a minimum, knock people out. It starts off, you may get some headaches, you may get dizziness, but it eventually risks right up to the fact of death. So, building code and stuff, they're putting these in new homes. We strongly encourage citizens to put them not only in their home on the main floor, put them on every level. Again, because I'm in the industry, I see value in having them inside my bedroom because we sleep with our door closed, as you should. But if carbon monoxide gets in the room, it'll alert you and let you know. One of the things with carbon monoxide is if that detector goes off, it's pretty hard to find the source as a homeowner unless you have the proper equipment. So that's another opportunity to call 911, have them come out, whether it's fire crews or whatnot, and they will do an investigation and see where the carbon monoxides come from. Could be your furnace, fireplace, could be a car in the garage. We've known that car starters have oddly started in the middle of the night, which I think they've cleared that up. But anything, that burns fuels. So again, it's a great idea and a thing to have in your home.
How about fire extinguishers?
Yeah, so it's another line of defense. Having it in the proper location, because as we know, cooking fire is the #1 cause of fires. So not having it right by that cooking, like where you're putting yourself in danger trying to access the extinguisher, but having it in an area where it's accessible, it may aid you in your escape, getting out of the home, because if the fire is between you and a door, you might be able to push the fire down enough where you can still get out without burning yourself. So they are important. It's nice to have a couple around the house. I know they're not the prettiest things to look at, but at the end of the day, it could save your life. So having it in an area where, everyone in the family knows they're there, and then maintaining them as well, because you can have an extinguisher, but if it's not maintained and you go to use it,
it doesn't work, then there is no use, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I think in the fire extinguisher, there is certain kind of chemical which helps to dose down the fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes back to excluding the oxygen, right? So, when you put the agent from the extinguisher on the fire, what it does is separate the combustibles from the air, so it actually snuffs it down a bit.
और यहाँ पर एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्टर जो मैं मिस्टर जेफ से बात कर रहा था कि अगर आपके पैन में ऑयल है और उसमें आग लग गई है तो प्लीज़ कभी पानी ना डालें, क्योंकि पानी से वो आग और भड़कती है। और हमारे इस अगर आप YouTube या Facebook पे अगर आप हमारे इस प्रोग्राम को सुनेंगे तो उसमें एक मैं लिंक ज़रूर शेयर करूँगा जो दिखाता है कि कैसे जो पानी है वो ऑयल के साथ मिलकर उस आग को और भड़का सकता है। आप देख रहे हैं हमारा प्रोग्राम कैलगरी फोकस ऑन पंजाबी नेशनल। एक छोटा सा ब्रेक, अब ब्रेक के बाद मैं आपसे दोबारा जुड़ूंगा। देखते रहिए, सुनते रहिए पंजाबी नेशनल। वेलकम बैक, एक बार फिर से आपका स्वागत हमारे प्रोग्राम कैलगरी फोकस में। हम बात कर रहे हैं मिस्टर जेफ बुदाई से जो कि हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं कैलगरी फायर डिपार्टमेंट से। सर, as I was telling our listeners that in case there is a fire in the pan which has oil, so the first thing is to make sure not to put water, right? How do you say that? Like it is, people will say no, the water is a bad conductor of fire, so it will douse off the fire. But can you explain what does it do to the oil?
Yeah, so on ordinary combustibles, like whether it's wood or furniture or whatever, we put water on. It's common practice. When we're dealing with oils, and we see this a lot. People feel that we have an oil pan fire and they're going to put water on it. I know you're talking about the link. It shows you we put half a cup of water on a pot of oil, and what it does is, because they don't mix, so it wants to separate, the water goes to the bottom and literally explodes the oil out of the pan. And if we wanted to get a little more granular, it's it expands 1,700 times as the steam starts to come and the oil starts to splatter. So you can imagine how quickly that oil, that burning hot oil, is going to light everything else on fire. Not only that, but you're putting yourself at risk too, because if it splashes on, on a human body, it's going to cause significant injury. So, and one thing I just wanted to mention as well, because we're talking about, cooking fires and cooking with oil. If you exclude the oxygen, you put the lid on it or cover it and turn the heat off. One of the most important things as well is not to try to remove that pan from the stove, because we've seen injuries occur where people feel like it's out,
right,
but they want to make sure that this is no longer a risk. So they take the pot and then they start going to take it outside.
Absolutely, you're right.
And if the lid falls off or it reignites, now you've got a bigger problem, because now you are right in direct contact with those flames. You'll probably drop the pot or the pan, and then it's going to
spread all over
that way. So, it's a couple easy steps. I know it's not something we think of every day. If I can talk to your listeners and say, please do not do this, is do not put water on an oil fire, because it's not going to end in a positive manner.
Absolutely, sir. Mr. Jeff, another concern which comes to my mind, and which I get to hear from a lot of seniors especially, that they are afraid to call 911 for fire truck, because they think in case it's a false alarm, then they'll be charged for that truck coming to the house. How far is it true?
When citizens make that call, and I'm going to give you in Cole's notes, quite often we wouldn't consider that a false alarm, because somebody has a concern for someone's safety or there's some sort of risk. So if you feel that there's an issue or some sort of risk to either injury or a possible fire, please call 911. Where we see false alarms, it's usually through a monitoring system. And one of the reasons why that was brought in is because we were going back to the same location 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row. And the homeowner or the commercial owner didn't want to upgrade their system or didn't want to have that thing fixed.
Right.
So we implemented false alarm charges, which kind of forced their hand to get the system back up running properly. If it's a concern of a citizen, we'll come in and do an investigation. We'll take a look around, make sure everything's safe, and chances are there's not going to be any charges. Now, that being said, if we have a homeowner that just keeps calling for the same thing, and we've already explained to them, this is totally normal, circumstances have changed there. But for the most part, we're tax funded. We're there to help the citizens. We're not there to try to take out of their pockets. We want to make sure everybody's happy at the end of the day. So,
absolutely, sir. जैसा आपने सुना, एक बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट जो मिस्टर जेफ बता रहे हैं कि जो ये एक प्रथा सी बन गई है कि लोग डरते हैं कि हम अगर फायर ट्रक को कॉल करेंगे तो हमें पैसे देने पड़ेंगे, लेकिन उसके भी एक रीज़न है, उसके पीछे भी काफ़ी चीज़ें ये लोग देखते हैं, उसके बाद ही चार्जेस आप पे इम्प्लाई होते हैं। फायर फाइटर होना एक बहुत गर्व की बात है, इट्स अ ह्यूज रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, और आपको ये हमेशा फील होता है कि आप किसी की हेल्प कर रहे हैं। एक अजीब सा जज्बा है, जैसे कि आप कहीं पे जंग लड़ने जा रहे हैं एज अ सोल्जर, वैसे ही आप किसी की हेल्प कर रहे हैं as a firefighter. Mr. Jeff, if somebody wants to join this department, what is the best way to get all the information and whom to contact, if you can help us with that?
Mm-hmm. So let me start by saying it's an amazing career. It's not for everybody. I mean, we go to some of people's worst days in their life.
Absolutely.
So, you have to be able to manage that internally. But I also want to say it's an amazing career where you may not just want to firefight. You might want to go down a different avenue, such as myself, where you go into different specialties, or you provide education to Calgarians. If they want to learn more, again, it's not my division, but it's calgary.ca/CFDYYC.
Okay.
And it's our recruitment page. And we currently have 41 firefighters being trained right now. It sounds like we might take another class of 40 later this year. And again, it's all budget related. So if the funds are there, we'll be able to open up new stations. And I think they're looking at maybe 2 classes next year of 40 firefighters. So if your listeners are interested, I strongly encourage it. It's great to have people from all sorts of backgrounds. It's like taking one screwdriver and you can only do one thing with it. But if you have a uni driver and it's got different bits, you're so much more effective, right? When we put a fire crew together and you've got an electrician, a plumber, or someone who's got an extensive background in education, it makes for a stronger team. So by all means, if your listeners are interested, take a look at that link. It talks about all the different steps, the timelines, but it's definitely worth looking at. It's an amazing career.
अमेजिंग। तो आपने सुना कि अगर आप भी इस कैरियर को ज्वाइन करना चाहते हैं तो आप वेबसाइट पे जाएं और वहाँ से इन्फॉर्मेशन लें। बहुत ही एक रेप्यूटेड और एक जज्बे वाला कैरियर जहाँ पे आप लोगों की हेल्प कर सकते हैं। हमारे पास टाइम कम होता है तो इसलिए आज हम आपको पार्ट 1 जो मिस्टर जेफ के साथ है वो हमने आज किया और आपको कुछ जानकारी दी। बहुत तरह की फायर्स हैं और बहुत ज़्यादा इन्फॉर्मेशन इस विषय पे हम आपको दे सकते हैं और देना चाहेंगे। तो आज मैं आपसे विदा लेता हूँ, लेकिन आने वाले टाइम पे हम एक बार फिर से मिस्टर जेफ के साथ जुड़ेंगे और वी विल इनवाइट हिम अगेन ओवर हियर एंड वी विल डू more discussion about different kind of fires and how it can be prevented and it can save your lives. Mr. Jeff, I thank you on behalf of my team for coming over here, and I would love to invite you again so that you can come again and give more information about other aspects of fire and how it can be prevented and we can save many lives. Before we end today's program, what message you would like to tell our listeners?
Well, you know what? Don't be afraid to make that call. And I know that seems to be one of the major concerns. 911 is a system that's there for a reason. And I just want to thank you for having me on the show. I think this is a great opportunity to speak to yourself and your listeners. And hopefully everybody got something out of it. And if not, we have a system in Calgary, 311. If they have any questions, they can definitely, go through that process and it'll come into my group and we'll do the best we can to get back to them and answer their questions.
Thank you so much for your time and being over here, sir. मैं आपसे विदा लेता हूँ और अगले हफ्ते दोबारा आपसे मैं जुड़ूंगा। तब तक के लिए अपना ध्यान रखें, सेफ रहें। मिलते हैं अगले वीक। Thank you so much.